And this is really an essential point, actually. It is really a crucial thing that cannot be overpronounced, that external objects, people and places and things, are not the main causes for happiness or suffering. But it is the state of our own minds which acts as the main cause for either the experience of happiness or suffering. In other words, our experience of the world, how we experience the world, is determined by our minds, by how we think. It is really our own thoughts, our own inner attitude, the perspective we bring to the world, which determines how we experience our life. Which is why in Buddhism, it's always about how to develop the mind. It's always about how to work on the mind, how to work on our thoughts, on our inner world, how to be able to deal with our thoughts, our reactions, our emotional life more skillfully, basically. Because it's the particular thoughts that we nourish within us, which then determine either, leading to an experience of well-being, confidence, and inner joy, fulfillment, or they are acting for the causes of suffering, frustration, repeated confusion. So therefore, in Buddhist study and practice, it's all about developing the inside. It's much more about developing how things are within than developing the things around us, so to say. No? It's about how are we apprehending the things around us from within. Because in the outside, we can have everything, right? We can have the most beautiful possessions, have the best of friends around us, have a wonderful partner, wonderful children, success at work, a high income. We can have a great apartment, we can own a house, we can experience the greatest vacations and go traveling around the world, afford everything we can only dream of. And with all that, we can feel totally miserable, isn't it? Feel completely unhappy with all of it. Feel insecure through and through. That's very possible, isn't it? But on the other hand, also, we can live very modestly, live a very, very simple life, have almost nothing, just get by, have no success, no income, hardly be noticed by anybody, be quite on our own, with no people around us, no friends. Maybe even be ill, physically restricted and confronted with many problems, while our inner attitude is strong, while inside we feel very safe, stable, and secure, our hearts being full of love, compassion, full of kindness, generosity, openness, wisdom, understanding. And therefore we can consider ourselves thoroughly happy human beings. That's also very possible, isn't it? It depends entirely on the mind that we bring to the various situations and circumstances that we experience, how we approach them from within, our perspective on them, how we think. That is the most crucial thing. It's really our thoughts which are the source of our experiences in life. No? Because after all, it's our thoughts that lead us to make certain decisions in life. And these decisions then drive our actions, our behavior. And this creates, brings all kinds of, things into motion, which then determines and shapes how we experience our lives. It starts with the thoughts, the mind. I'm not saying that external circumstances have nothing at all to do with how we feel. Of course, external situations and circumstances and other people, they do contribute to either a sense of joy and well-being or misery, suffering, yes. But external things are not the actual sources for that experience. They are not the core cause for what we experience. Because as I just mentioned, many of us have all kind of external circumstances which might be really, really wonderful, but we still feel very insecure, very confused, and maybe quite unhappy, right? Or maybe life is 95% wonderful, 99% great. But there is this one thing, this one factor that does not happen the way we want, one circumstance, one person, one situation that is not the way of how we would like it to be. And this one thing then completely takes us over so that we do not see anything else but this one problem, isn't it? That then seems to define our whole being. That's very possible, isn't it? We know that. It comes from how we think. It comes from where we put our focus, where we put our attention. So in Buddhism now, it's about understanding clearly for ourselves personally, each and every one of us here, personally for ourselves, to understand, okay, what are the thoughts that I usually entertain in my life? What are the thoughts that I follow after, that I keep thinking in my everyday activities? What do I usually tell myself in my mind about myself, others, this, that? And how does that affect how I feel? What effect does that have on my behavior, my actions, my life? To really consider, what are the thoughts that make me feel good, that make me feel confident, bring me joy, well-being, a long-term sense of security and satisfaction? And what are the thoughts that make me feel bad, make me feel insecure, lead me to a low self-esteem, anxiety, recurring frustration? We should really look at that. Actually, we should really allow ourselves some time to make that inner discovery, to look inside and recognize, okay, what's going on in my mind? What are the thoughts that actually make sense in my mind? What are the thoughts that are constructive, reasonable, healthy, beautiful? And what are the thoughts that are really rather confused, destructive, unreasonable, exaggerating things, not really making sense, just going around in circles, never leading anywhere, leading me to further confusion and suffering, to constant unnecessary worry? To really identify that within us, first of all, and then learn how to develop the courage to consciously make the decision, okay, the healthy, constructive, positive, reasonable thoughts I will nourish. I will practice them more. I will take more time to cultivate them, to think them, to familiarize my mind with them. Whereas the unhealthy, destructive, unreasonable thoughts, I will not give them my energy so much anymore. I'm not going to put my attention on them. I will not allow them as much in my mind anymore because they cause me to suffer. This is kind of our responsibility, as beings, as humans. This is actually our main meditation, because it's our own thoughts that we nourish and entertain, which will become our identity in the end. When the Buddha talked about what he called the Four Noble Truths, the very first teaching that the Buddha gave after he achieved a state of full enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, when he talked about the Four Noble Truths, he basically talked about that, actually. In this teaching, he very practically laid out how, okay, on the one hand, these here are the problems, the dissatisfactions, the sufferings we experience in life. And this is where they come from, how they arise, what their causes are. First and second noble truth. And this here is the happiness, the joy, the inner fulfillment, the well-being I can experience. And this is what makes that arise, where that comes from, what the causes for that are. Third and fourth noble truth. And he then makes the point that our suffering, dissatisfaction, and reoccurring problems in life, in our mind, arise from, have their root in our unsubdued, attached, exaggerating, self-centered thoughts. That's what the cause for suffering is. Whereas our happiness, well-being, satisfaction, lasting inner joy and inner freedom arises from, has its root in our own subdued, realistic, wise, loving, compassionate, kind thoughts. That's what the cause for liberation is, as he called it. Inner freedom, lasting well-being. Now, Buddhist practice in turn means, how can I most skillfully diminish the unsubdued, attached, exaggerating, self-centered thoughts? Because they are the ones that lead me to suffering, and I would like to have less suffering in my life, don't I? And how can I most skillfully cultivate, nourish the subdued, wise, beautiful, loving, compassionate, generous thoughts in order to have more stable well-being and happiness in my life, which is what I wish for, which is what I want, don't I? To skillfully diminish one side, our delusions, our disturbing thought obscurations, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche called them, and increase the other, inner wisdom, love, and compassion. And then manifest that in the world through my actions, how I engage with others, compassionate deeds. This is basically it. This, in a nutshell, is what it really comes down to in Buddhist study and practice. To bring that to perfection, fully taking away the cause for suffering, unsubdued mind states, and fully nourishing and bringing to completion one's realizations, love, compassion, and wisdom. That is what will lead us to a state of liberation and full enlightenment, as we call it in Buddhist jargon. Knowing, what do I want to nourish within me? Who do I want to become? And what will I not nourish within me anymore? What do I not want to become? Who do I not want to be? This is what we call here being the gardener of your own mind. Kind of. So looking at it like that, we can see how the Buddha's approach to freedom from suffering and the attainment of a more stable sense of happiness, how it actually evolves around or builds on one basic thing. It builds on one crucial teaching, namely the Buddha's teaching on the law of cause and effect. How the law of cause and effect works in our minds. How all our experiences in life are underpinned by that. And how by understanding how cause and effect work within us, we can begin to influence the process and take advantage of it by way of actively cultivating the causes that lead us to happiness and actively refraining from creating the causes that lead us to suffering. Understanding the law of cause and effect and living our lives in accordance with it is really the key. It is the very method how to decrease suffering and increase happiness, according to the Buddha's view. So now, I would like to share this with you briefly in a short presentation that I prepared for you here, just in order to illustrate that a little bit, how we talk about cause and effect in this tradition, and what we as people can draw from this for our new year, a happier new year, a less suffering new year, happy and peaceful minds. First of all, we need to understand that whatever we want to achieve in our life, whatever result we would like to experience in our lives, be it in our minds or also be it in the external world, I don't know, in our careers or in our relationships or in our emotional life, whatever result we want to experience, we always have to bring together the appropriate causes for it. Because any happening is the result that comes independent upon appropriate causes and conditions. This is really the first thing, actually, that we need to think about before we go any further in Buddhism, Because just as in the external world, the law of cause and effect is operating, is working, right? It's raining all day, the ground is slippery and wet, cause and effect. I forgot my jacket and I thought it's warmer in Dharamsala. Now I feel cold, cause and effect. I switch on the light switch, light comes if there is no power cut, cause and effect. Is happening all the time, right? Well, the Buddha points out in the same way also in our inner world, with respect to our minds and how we experience our reality, the law of cause and effect is working all the time. In our minds, cause and effect play out all the time. And if we look at this deeply, it gives us a very inspiring insight into the Buddhist model of the mind, Buddhist psychology, we could call it. So in general, when we discuss to some causes leading to a particular effect, there are two main things that we need to pay attention to. There are what we call main causes and contributing conditions. Both of these need to be taken into account when we talk about cause and effect playing out. So it might sound complicated, but it's very straightforward. And it's rather helpful to maybe take a particular example to illustrate that for us, okay? To take a simple example. Let's take a simple example for a result, a particular effect. Let's take the example of a flower, okay? What are the causes and conditions that need to come together for a flower to grow and bloom? We need various things to come together for a flower to grow and bloom, right? We need fertile earth. We need sunshine, warmth from the sun. We need water and maybe fertilizer to help the growing process. We might need some protection put a fence around our little flower so that no animals trample over it, you know. We also need the factor of time unfolding. Time needs to elapse, you know, for a flower to grow. All these various factors, all these contributing conditions need to come together. They are needed for a flower to grow and bloom. Wouldn't you agree? Now, although we might have all these conditions coming together, all these conditions being present, are these conditions alone enough for a flower to grow and bloom? No, right? There's something missing, isn't there? What is missing? The seed is missing. If the seed of the flower is not present in the ground, planted in fertile ground, then obviously there can be no flower. No matter how much I apply certain conditions, I can do that as much as I like. No. If the main cause for the flower, the seed in the ground, is not planted, a flower cannot arise. So the main cause, the substantial cause for the flower is the seed. So these two, the main cause, the seed of the flower, and its contributing condition, as above, when they come together, they will produce a flower, for sure. And not just any flower, but a very particular flower, depending upon the seed that are planted in the ground, right? If I plant a tulip seed, I will get a tulip. If I plant a rose seed, I will get a rose, not a tulip. Doesn't matter how much I want a tulip. If I plant a rose seed, I can do as many prayers as I like. It will not arise, right? The particular result that I want to get depends upon the main cause that is created, isn't it? The type of result that we get depends upon substantial main cause. Okay. So this is something which makes total sense to us. It is rather obvious. I think it's quite clear, isn't it? Now, what we have to understand here is that just as with the flower, it is the very same when it comes to the experience of happiness. We can translate the very same principle also to our minds and how we experience the world through our minds. If we want happiness in our life, if we want to make happiness, satisfaction, and joy flourish within us, if we want to have a stable garden of confidence and satisfaction and happiness within us, we need to take care of two things: main causes and contributing conditions. And this is a really important point. To give rise to the experience of happiness within us, happiness is the result of certain causes. Therefore, we need to bring together the appropriate causes and conditions, otherwise happiness, satisfaction cannot grow. Just as with a flower. And it's also the same with suffering. If we want to be free from suffering, dissatisfaction, and difficulties in the mind, we have to overcome its causes. And this is simply a natural principle. It is a law of nature, of how reality works. It's not made up by someone. It's not that the Buddha invented this, but the Buddha discovered this. He observed this law. And he observed that if one lives in accordance with that law, meaning planting the right seeds in one's own mind, then one will gain the right results. The Buddha saw that very clearly. And this actually becomes the very basis, the very foundation of all of his teachings. And it's a very interesting one, because normally we think happiness is what should be there. Happiness should be my default mode. I should be happy. And suffering, dissatisfaction, and problems should not be there. It's like if I suffer or there's dissatisfaction there, something is wrong. It's wrong when that happens. But this would be like saying a tulip should be there in my garden, and a rose shouldn't be. A tulip should happen, and a rose should not happen. There's something wrong when a rose happens. Well, whatever happens in your garden, in our external gardens, it depends upon what you have planted in the garden. To expect tulips to grow if you've not planted the seeds, it's a little bit unrealistic attitude, isn't it? Leads to disappointment. If you expect happiness to be there and suffering not to be there, it's a bit like that, expecting tulips to grow and roses not to grow. It's like expecting a particular garden to be there, to grow by itself, where there are no weeds and everything is just wonderful. This should be my default mode in my garden. But it's a completely unrealistic attitude, actually. It makes total sense if we put it in a garden example, right? Of course, you would say, well, it depends on my own gardening work of what kind of garden I will get. It depends on me. What am I putting here? All this I'm going to take out there. You're going to have a plan for your garden, don't you? We'll say, okay, here's my piece of land. It has a lot of potential. Looks a bit messy, a bit overgrown at the moment, but you can see I can do a lot of good things here. I put my potatoes over here, my tomatoes over there. Here I'm going to make this particular flower bed. Here I'm going to put my pumpkin. Here I'm going to make a small little bench for me and my partner to sit and enjoy the evening. And then you kind of get to work. Well, when it comes to our minds and the experience of either happiness or suffering, it's pretty much the same thing. We should have some plan of how to go about cultivating ourselves, the mind from within. Just as with this analogy of the flower, if we now take this and apply it to the mind and our daily experiences in life, it works pretty much the same way. Although there might be all kinds of conditions present on the outside which seem pleasurable for us, like as if there's certain things or certain food or certain people or certain experiences on the outside that can bring me happiness, that can satisfy me. Actually, outer things are just conditions. They themselves on their own cannot make me happy. Just as with the flower, in the same way, outer conditions cannot produce the result of happiness within you as such. No? Pasta, for example, it cannot make you happy. It's hard to believe for some of us, maybe, especially for my Italian friends. It's hard to believe. When I lived in Italy, it was a wonderful time. We make incredible pasta. Every evening, Lama Institute, there's different kinds of pastas with different kinds of sauces. And it's, we tried it many times. We tried it all many, many times that maybe actually pasta can make you happy. Maybe actually it is a cause for happiness as such, because it looks like that, it appears like that. But if an external thing like pasta, even in Italy, where an inherent cause for happiness, the way it appears to us, then the consequence of that would be, it would logically follow that the more pasta I eat, the happier I would get. And we all tried it. No, but actually it does not really work, does it? The more pasta you eat, it's not the case that you get happier and happier and happier. Actually, interestingly, the opposite is the case. The more pasta you eat, the less happy you get. The more pasta you eat, the more discomfort you experience in the body and in the mind. This is what the Buddha told the suffering, or what the Buddha called in his teaching, being the suffering of change. That those things or activities which initially seem to be a cause for happiness, the more you do them, the more you engage in them, the more you repeat them, the more the pleasant feeling you get from them changes into unpleasantness. Right? Was it ever a cause for happiness the way it appeared? As if this outside thing, if you were only to get it, could provide you with a stable sense of happiness? It cannot from its own side. It is just a condition. It's a condition. If you have not created the main cause for happiness in your mind, the result of happiness and satisfaction cannot come about, no matter how much you apply certain outer conditions. And that's interesting. If you have not planted the seed of satisfaction and happiness in your mind, happiness cannot grow in the mind, no matter the outer conditions. The main cause for how we experience something lies within our minds. Our experiences are determined by what we have created, what seeds we have planted with our own actions and thoughts. The kind of experience we are going to have with respect to particular outer conditions we encounter, other people, certain things, food, materials, things, places, what have you. It is the ripening of a karmic seed that we ourselves have planted with how we think, with how we speak, with how we act. Our experience of the world is determined by how we habituate our minds with our own way of thinking, speaking, acting, relating to others with our actions. That is what creates the main cause for our future experiences. And the main cause for the experience of happiness, the main seeds, that really will give rise to the flower of satisfaction and inner fulfillment and stable sense of security and well-being, is practicing virtue. What is that? It means engaging in actions of body, speech, and mind based on the motivation of love, compassion, and wisdom. Having habituated our minds with love, compassion, and wisdom, the wisdom that sees things clearly, having habituated ourselves with actions of generosity, kindness, empathy, goodwill, sharing with others, caring for others, helping when someone else is in need, being loving and kind and considerate. This is what we call a subdued mind, a pacified mind, a trained mind in love, compassion, and the wisdom that sees how things actually are, that clearly sees the nature of reality. How do we create that? How do we subdue the mind? How do we develop a mind of love, compassion, and wisdom? A mind that will lead us to happier and happier states of mind, of experience, more and more peaceful and causes us to bring happiness and peace to others, we have to see that our minds are indeed like a garden. And what grows in our garden depends on the seeds we sow in our garden, seeds we sow in the ground. Meaning, how we experience things in life depends on how we habituate this mind over and over. In other words, the seeds here are our habits. We all do have certain habits, don't we? Things we do and think again and again and again in our lives. Certain actions we engage in, certain patterns of thinking, certain things we speak about with others or to others that we are habituated to. The thing is, we have to know whenever we do something, whenever we follow a particular habit, we deepen that habit in our minds. We habituate our minds to do the same thing again and again. And also, it will determine how we experience things over and over in a particular way. According to the Buddhist model of the mind, whatever action we do with our body, with our speech, with our mind, meaning how we act, how we speak, how we think, whatever we do, every thought actually also, with a particular intention behind it, being motivated by a particular urge, a particular intention, a particular volition, our particular perspective that we bring to these actions, all of these actions, they plant a seed in the mind. They leave a particular potential, a particular imprint, we call it, in the mind. We habituate our minds in a very particular way with how we act and think and speak. Every action leaves a karmic seed, a karmic potential for a certain experience to arise again for us in the future. For example, when we act out of tolerance and respect, the seed of tolerance and respect are planted in our mind, which will on the one hand cause us to be kind and tolerant and respectful again in the future, and also experience kindness, tolerance, and respect from others. If we act out of forgiveness and love, these seeds are planted in our mind, and they will give rise to positive, healthy results of love and being forgiven by others, and also increase our habit to be loving and forgiving in the future. It leads to happiness and unity. The same goes for our actions, thoughts, and words motivated by states of mind such as attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, and so forth. When we act motivated based on these mind states, they plant a particular seed in the mind. And that will give rise to, first of all, being attached and angry and jealous and proud again in the future, as well as receiving the results of not so comfortable experiences, the experience of dissatisfaction and suffering, others acting towards us with attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, and so forth. Which is to say, from actions, thoughts, and words based on a goodwill, loving, and kind intention, the result of happiness arises in our minds and in our lives. From actions based on the intention of attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, ignorance, delusion, the result of suffering, dissatisfaction, problems, and misery will come about. And here we talk about it even in the smallest actions we do. Every action we do is a seed. And we know from the smallest seed, if planted in the mind, in the garden, yeah, and then nourished, a big tree or plant can arise, giving rise to many, many fruits and many, many further seeds, isn't it? So all these various seeds, when they are then in turn nourished, and over time will find the right conditions, when the right conditions come together, these seeds will then sprout and they will give rise to a particular experience, how things will manifest for us in our life. This way, we can really say that whatever we think, whatever we do, whatever we say with a certain intention behind it is the very process of creating ourselves as a person, as Venerable Rubina Kudin would put it. I really like that because it really makes sense to us, doesn't it? Whatever we think, do, and say is the very process of programming our mind, which will then in turn determine how we will experience ourselves, others, our environment, everything. It literally produces our future selves, who we will become as a person, and how we will feel in life. It is this process up here which is the very cause and effect chain of what will give rise to our future experience, who and what we will be. It depends upon what kind of seeds we plant in the mind. And in turn, what kind of seeds we then nourish with our attention, with our actions, with our thoughts, and so forth. No? There is this saying, I have two wolves in my heart, a black one and a white one. Which one of them will survive? Well, the one you feed, right? It's kind of the same idea. This is the most general way of how we talk about karma in Buddhism. It refers to the law of cause and effect in the mind, the law of cause and effect with respect to the actions that we do and the experiences that we get from them as a result. And the key behind all this is our intentions, our motivation, our perspective that we bring to things and actions and so forth. It simply shows how we experience the world depends on the mind. That the world out there is not as independent from our minds as it appears, as we initially think. And what we experience is not just something totally random, but it actually has something to do with what we have created with our own actions in the past. And from the perspective of Buddhism, this happens in this life, and from the Buddhist perspective, throughout many, many lives before this life, and into many, many lives after this life. So now, when we see this a bit, when we think about this idea, okay, that I'm kind of sharing with you here, how our own thoughts and actions are influencing everything that we experience, planting seeds in the garden of our minds, well, then the big question arises, what kind of seeds do I want to plant in my mind with how I think, speak, and act? What kind of causes do I want to create, with the particular actions that I do, the activities I follow, the way how I speak to others, with what I think in my mind? Do I want more desire, more attachment, more anger, more jealousy, more separation, more arrogance, more pride, more confusion, more ignorance? Or do I want more contentment, kindness, compassion, love, generosity, wisdom, unity, coming together? Right? If we want to make our inner garden flourish with happiness And I think all of us to some degree want that. I guess so. If you really want to have a garden full of hatred and separation and attachment, well, that's up to you, I guess. I think we don't like that. I think we want to have a really peaceful, relaxed, chilled out, beautiful, natural, bio-organic garden. And we want to invite all our friends and have a party of joining unity, rejoicing in the hands together. No? Dancing all night long. Yes or no? Great. Yeah, I agree. Right? So how do we create that? The thing is, we need to create it. We need to make it. We need to check in what kind of condition is my garden of the mind right now. Because we have some of these plants, right? There is the radish of kindness and the tulip of compassion. And so they are there, right? We have, I don't know, we have them somewhere. I don't know what these vegetables are called in English. They're just on the screen. But we have some of the positive ones and we have some of the harmful, not so nice ones. Now it's just to see, okay, what's going on in my mind? Nourish one side and kind of slowly take out and uproot the other and not nourish the other side. No. Taking care of our intentions, of our actions, our habits, they will create who we will be in the future and how we're going to experience everything, basically. Of course, this view is profoundly different from our usual view of ourselves as a person and how we experience life. We actually do not think like that at all. We think, I am me. And there is a core me in here that does not change, that cannot change. Doesn't matter what I think, do, or say. And there is a fixed world out there with these particular people and these places existing totally independently from my mind, from my experience. And I just come along and experience what's already there and doesn't really have anything to do, with how things exist, are not dependent upon my mind, apprehending them, perceiving them. Well, that's not the Buddhist view. The Buddhist view is the person that we are and the world that we experience is basically a result of our actions. Our way of thinking, speaking with others, and acting. It starts in the mind. The person who we will be, or let's say it in this way, the person we are right now, what goes on in our mind right now, how we experience the world outside of us, right now, is the result of the actions that we did in the past. Who we are going to be, how we are going to experience ourselves in the future, what is going to go on in our minds in the future, how we will experience our surroundings in the future, is the result of the actions we do right now. We cannot really control what is happening to us at the moment. Things are just happening, right? They are results from the past. But what we can at least learn how to control to some degree is, how am I now going to react to what is happening to me? And this is what's going to determine what you're going to experience in the future. Although we might think we are this fixed personality, this absolute me, self, I, we are actually not something fixed, but we are a process. We are a constant process of becoming something else all the time. Really, isn't it? We are not something static, but we think we are. That's why we suffer, actually, a lot of the times. We have this very solid view of myself. Here am I. This is it. But in fact, what we are, and that's another one from Venerable Rubina Kurtin, we are this interdependent scenario playing out all the time. We don't perceive ourselves that way, but when we think about it and analyze and study a little bit Buddha's incredible teachings, we see this I, this body, this mind, it is a dependent arising in dependence upon causes and conditions. Things arise. And I don't have maybe direct control over it, but we can have some indirect control over it. What am I doing with my mind? How am I acting? How am I thinking? And that's the good news, because it means we can change. When we understand the law of cause and effect, how it plays out in the mind, we can begin to take advantage of that cause and effect relationship, advantage of our knowledge of how we can garden and how we can make plants grow in our minds, nourish the one thing, uproot the other. When we do that, we can influence of who we are going to become, what we want to become. To the degree that we even can become Buddhas, enlightened beings. What is a Buddha? What is an enlightened being? Sounds so out there and very mystical, very holy. The Tibetan word for Buddha is the word Sangye. 2 syllables, Sangye. Sang means having completely cleansed, purified, taken away all obscurations and confusions and delusions of the mind. Having completely uprooted all the weeds, all what causes us to suffer, wrong views, mistaken views, attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, and their seeds in the mind, having uprooted that from the garden of the mind. That's what sang means, having ceased all disturbing thought obscurations and whatever obscures this mind. Whereas gye means having completely developed or brought to fruition all the wisdom, love, compassion, and positive qualities of the mind, having cultivated and completed all realizations of how things actually exist, I, others, phenomena, and having realized the interdependent, interconnected nature of reality, and therefore developed to their fullest extent love, compassion, and wisdom. So that's what a Buddha is. A Sangye is someone who has purified all obscurations and completed all realizations. That's what it means. It's very beautiful, very insightful to see what Sangye means, because basically it points to our potential as human beings to develop the most beautiful garden, the perfect garden. Yes. The land is there. It just depends on how you're going to use this land, you see. Your consciousness, your mind is here. The mind is by its nature clear and knowing. At the moment, it has all these seeds, all these habits and all these plants in there, which kind of cause us to cycle again in reoccurring states of dissatisfaction and suffering and fights and being dissatisfied and having anxiety and depression and not knowing who we are really and what's the purpose of all this and why am I here anyway? And we're often totally confused. It causes us so much suffering because the clear and knowing nature of the mind is obscured temporarily by these overgrowing of weird vegetables. But the potential of this mind is that we can take away these poisonous plants and plant the beautiful, wonderful, compassionate, loving radishes and salads and tomatoes and pumpkins and flowers and increase that. In other words, that's what we call Buddha nature in this tradition. Each and every one of us, by having a mind, we have the potential. Our very nature is to become a Buddha, a Sangye, a being that has overcome all confusion and has increased and completely developed all realization of how things are and opened the heart to its fullest extent to sentient beings that we are connected to already, but we don't get it because we think, I'm here, you are there. This is you, this is me. I like you, I hate you, I don't care about you. I am attached to you, I have hatred to you, I don't care about you. That's That's the weird vegetable garden situation that we're having at the moment. Anyway, so there's a great need to bring some order into the gardens of our minds, to make our inner garden beautiful. If you want to be happy and free from dissatisfaction, it is not going to happen by simply designing our external world to our liking. This is not going to cut it. Just working with some conditions on the outside, that things surrounding us are pleasant and kind of nice, and the partner and the house and the job and the car and the, whatever it is. Yeah, it's okay. Gives you some temporal kind of pleasure and security. But if we are thinking that this is going to be a stable cause for your inner satisfaction, we are walking on ice, because things are changing all the time. Could change any moment, right? So we have to, it's not going to cut it to manipulate the things around us. Put them all into the way that, oh, now it's perfect, and then freeze, now it should stay like that. Now I'm happy. Great, I worked for 25 years and now it's perfect. And suddenly all is perfect and you don't like it anymore. You don't want it anymore. Now that I have it, actually doesn't satisfy me. I mean, we know that, right? Then the mind changes, and then that thing changes, and that person changes, and your child does that, and your boyfriend decides to go with the other person. And then everything crumbles again. So it's time for us to look within, towards our inner world. We need to check, how am I acting, thinking, speaking, my habits. Then we create a beautiful, wonderful, strong inner world, maybe even to the degree of developing our mind to the highest level of Buddhahood, Sangyehood, making full use of our inner potential. And then relating to the world becomes a completely new ballgame, a completely new thing. What does that mean on a practical level for us now, being here as people? How can we begin to do that? Buddhahood, Sangyehood, one thing. What about right now, once we stand up from our cushions and go out for dinner? Rain is stopping slowly. It means that we simply start in our daily life to take some time in our day to actively become quiet, take a few breaths, to sit in a quiet space and actively begin to think the loving, compassionate, kind thoughts towards ourselves and others. To allow yourself, to give yourself permission to take some time to simply cultivate from within the thoughts of goodwill, tolerance, care, kindness, and love towards yourself and others. To create them in the mind actively, and then think them, let them abide in the mind, habituate your mind with them, familiarize your mind with these thoughts, so to speak. This is meditation. This is what meditation really means as far as Buddhist meditation is concerned. What is Buddhist meditation? It means familiarizing yourself with your inner world, your mind, and actively cultivating positive states of mind. Actively planting positive seeds in the garden of your mind. And doing that by way of identifying the harmful thoughts, the self-limiting, deprecating, criticizing thoughts, the inner chatterbox that always puts you down, and to identify that and say, hey, I'm not going to believe you so much anymore. You are not helpful. I'm not going to nourish you. Eventually, I'm going to learn methods on how to uproot you from my mind, because you cause me suffering. Identifying our delusional mind states and getting rid of them, diminishing them. That's basically it. So what we can do is, as soon as you hear about a person having a problem, a person suffering, something going wrong in somebody's life that you know, be it in your family, your circle of friends, or be it for people in the news that you read about on your iPad or that you hear on your podcasts in the world. You hear there's suffering happening. You immediately take that and to develop the thought, may they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. This is what we call compassion. May you be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. Just a thought, just that. You think that. You feel it in your heart and you hold it. May they have happiness and the causes of happiness. This is what we call love in Buddhism. That's the definition of loving kindness. May you be happy and have whatever you need to be happy, the causes of happiness. I wish that for you. And you hold that thought. Create it in your mind and allow that to be your first reaction towards others, And then you base your actions on these thoughts to some degree. Same for yourself. If you yourself suffer, if in your own mind things come up, that cause you to kind of go in circles, we have these thoughts, right? These habit patterns, this overthinking. We have problems arising in the mind. And as soon as a problem arises in the mind or a suffering arises in our heart, concerning our situation in life or what's going on at the moment in your life, immediately we want to find a solution, don't we? Whatever it is, we just want the problem to go away. But instead of finding a solution, what often happens is our mind goes in circles, around and around and around, trying to find a solution, but instead we get kind of stuck in this pattern of overthinking and frustration and not coming to any result. Isn't it? So to learn about methods, some new inner equipment we need, some new inner tools of how to step out of that spiral of overthinking and entertaining this kind of cycle of fear and hope and fear and hope, but instead finding new ways of how to tackle our inner problems, learning new ways of how to garden, this particular area of our garden, how to cultivate it. This is what Buddhist methods are for. This is what the Buddhist teaching is for. There are so many of them. The next talk, maybe, could talk about some of these methods. So, to take time for that, to nourish the positive thoughts and actively identify the negative thought patterns and not putting your attention there, get sucked into them, but to bring them to more positive ways of thinking. That is a bit the idea. When we do this a little bit every day, then we create new habits, Whatever we do with familiarization slowly becomes easier, it becomes a new habit, and it will give rise to its results. But it takes time, of course, and quite some effort. Just as with our ordinary gardens, it takes time and effort. Right? Often I hear people saying, Buddhism, meditation, working on your thoughts and on your mind. I tried it for a couple of years. Doesn't really work. It's a little bit like saying, yes, my garden, I really would like to have some oak trees here and some things there. I really would like to cultivate it. I tried it for some time, but it doesn't really work. I planted all the seeds, I watered them. Nothing really happened. Well, it takes some time for these things to grow, You have to provide the conditions for your plants for a long time. Speak to a gardener, they will tell you, often how much time and care it takes when nothing really happens. I mean, the essential thing does happen, but we don't see, because the roots have to first of all grow, and there's maybe a bit of a baby sprouty, but then it often gets trampled on by an animal, or the snails eat it, and you have to do it again. And but after some time, if you keep persisting, if you keep going, if you keep planting the seeds and keep providing the right conditions for the seeds to be nourished and the plants to grow, you will be successful. Karma will take care. It's just about a matter of not giving up, I guess. Not giving up. Well, that's one of the very famous little things you can buy here in Ganj everywhere. These little flags where there's these quotes by His Holiness Dalai Lama, and one of them says, "Never give up. Whatever you do, whatever happens, never give up." And it's true. Because whatever happens, if we keep going, planting the seeds, nourishing them, planting the seeds, nourishing them, things will happen. And eventually we'll end up with a New Year garden that we all want. That way. That's it, actually. That's all I wanted to say. That's what I was thinking about a little bit. Do you have any questions about this, or anything that comes up from your side by listening to these ideas that you would like to bring into this talk? And we can maybe talk, maybe from your side, something that I can respond to. Yes.
When we're wishing for the happiness of all sentient beings, and we think of someone who we are averse to, who might have intentions that are malicious, are we wishing happiness from the Buddhist perspective with kind of our own little Buddhist agenda slant, or are we wishing their happiness that they
What they want.
Yeah, what they want, how they derive their pleasure.
So the question is, when we think about wanting all sentient beings to be happy, right, which is one main thing within the Mahayana Buddhist approach, that we want all sentient beings to have happiness and the cause of happiness, all sentient beings to be free from suffering. Actually, we want all beings to become Buddhas. So we ourselves want to become a Buddha to lead all sentient beings to a state of Buddhahood as well. This is the idea of the great compassion, bodhicitta, the ultimate good heart. So when we say we want all sentient beings to be happy, and there is a particular person that we have aversion to, because maybe that particular person has malicious intentions, right? And when we say we want them to be happy, do we want them to be happy from the Buddhist kind of view, that kind of happiness? Or does it mean we want them to get what they want, which might be actually harmful for others, since they have malicious intentions, right? So yeah, I think that from the Buddhist perspective, when we talk about compassion and loving kindness and wanting others to be happy, that always has to be combined with wisdom as well, right? It has to be counterbalanced with the wisdom that sees things clearly, with common sense, which is to say, when we have the ultimate compassion at heart and wanting others to be happy, it does not mean that we are going to fulfill each and everybody's wish without intelligent discrimination. What that would mean for this person and other people. And certainly it will not mean that we're going to support another person's malicious intention because they want to. Because we will see when we do that, it will not bring happiness to the other person actually. Because when we support somebody else's malicious intentions, we support them to engage in actions which are harmful towards others, which causes them to suffer. And in turn, since they engage in harmful behavior, they create negative seeds in their mind, which will cause them to have suffering in the future. So actually, compassion has to be combined with the wisdom that really discriminates our short and long-term consequences of how we help and benefit others. So therefore, when we wish this person to be happy, we wish that person to be happy from the Buddhist perspective, as you put it, right? And that actually I see, okay, the person and the behavior they engage in are not one and the same. We usually fuse them together and think, look, there is this person engaging in harmful behavior, harmful person. I'm not having loving compassion towards them because they are harmful people. Why are they harmful people? Because they engage in harmful behavior. That's how we see it, right? Well, actually, right, what we are trying to do here in the Buddhist tradition to some degree is that yes, there is a person engaging in harmful behavior, and their behavior definitely has to be maybe rejected and not supported because it's harmful. Whereas the person behind the action is not the same as the action. They can change. They are themselves confused by disturbing emotions. They are themselves suffering. That's why they engage in harmful behavior. I wish that person to have happiness and the cause of happiness, yes. But maybe that only happens by way of me not supporting what they are engaging in. But then thinking, how can I actually help them? What would actually help them? What can I do in my life to support the opposite action that might influence this person to not engage in their harmful behavior anymore? How can I react towards that harmful behavior, which will bring benefit to the person, which might mean rejecting that harmful behavior, right? Of course. Not saying, oh, Mani Padme Hum, it's fine, I'm a Buddhist, I want you to be happy, that's why you engage in harmful behavior. It's okay. Not at all. You might say, stop, you can't do this. You have to stop this. That's also compassion, because you want that person to be free from suffering. And when they engage in harmful behavior, they create suffering. So we need that wisdom that discriminates very clearly. How can I help? What will my help cause for that other person and the surroundings? And how will that bring benefit to the whole situation on the short term and the long term? That's what I think. That makes sense? Yeah. Yeah. No, not that. Mm. Anything else? Yeah. Mm.
But then let's say sometimes some non-virtuous thoughts come up and then you're like, okay, I'm not engaging with it. But then they get like a little bit more stronger in your mind. Does that happen here? And then how do you bypass that?
Well, when we talk about, engaging in virtuous thoughts and not engaging in non-virtuous thoughts, let's say, then we identify, oh, there's a non-virtuous thought, and we don't engage in it, and it becomes stronger and stronger, and then it kind of overwhelms you maybe, right? So how do we deal with that? Yeah. I guess, what do we mean by not engaging in a non-virtuous thought? It certainly does not mean suppressing it or seeing, oh my God, there's a non-virtuous thought, I'm not engaging in it. Because by that way of non-engaging, you are actually engaging with it by way of pushing it away, right? By way of developing an aversion to it and think, oh, this shouldn't be there. It's a non-virtuous thought, so you push it out. It's fine. It's a bit like you have a boiling pot of, you want to cook pasta because it seems like to be the cause of happiness, so you cook the pasta. You have a boiling pot of water, and then, oh my God, it's boiling water. You put the lid on and say, it's fine. It's not there, right? While it boils and boils and boils. It has to do with, I think, that we identify the non-virtuous thought as a non-virtuous thought. See, aha, here we are. There is this negative thought maybe in my mind. What if I follow it? If I identify with it and I attain it, it will grow, right? If I act on it, it will grow. If I push it down and avert it and suppress it, it will grow also. It's also a form of identification, interestingly, to suppressive thought. So I guess it is seeing, oh, here it is. Here it is. You can not engage in it by way of still accepting it appearing for you right now. It is there. It happens in my mind. This non-virtuous thought, this thought pattern that arises, is simply a fruit of a past seed, to stay with our analogies here. It is the result of a past action. I've thought this thought many, many times. I've engaged in actions that bring up this thought and this habit again. Aha, now not to take it and plant it in the ground again, but to see, here it is. But on a fundamental level, I'm deciding not to put my attention on it. It's just talking. It's like your roommate that keeps talking while you just want to sleep. A Tushita course, actually it's silence, right? But your roommate's still talking and you kind of don't put your attention there. And after a while, that voice might fade down a bit. It's like it is this middle way, I guess, between acknowledging, accepting that thought being there, because if it's arising, it's arising. You can't reject it, right? It's kind of there. But to see the joy in it, that you have the freedom not having to follow it, but instead maybe creating a counter-positive thought that you then follow. It's a bit like a game, you know? It's like a computer game. The thought of attachment comes up. Like, oh my God, strong attachment. It takes us a long time to, first of all, identify a thought of attachment as being there. You notice, oh, there's a strong attachment arising within me. What is my counter-positive thought? Becoming content with what I have and understanding, oh, if I follow this now, it's not the cause for happiness. It's not going to bring me what I actually wish for. It's just going to deepen attachment in my mind again. I'm going to be attached again in the future. I'm not going there. You're doing what you're doing, but I'm not going there. Instead, I focus on the counter-positive thought. And then to see the joy, the relaxation in that, I think is important. I'm just saying what I think, how I try to do it sometimes. To see the beauty, the freedom that is there, that you can decide, I'm not going there. That freedom you have, that we can practice. I'm not following that because I've identified this thought, this pattern leads me to further suffering. Instead, it's not easy, of course, but it's possible, right? So the thought comes, you notice it, you recognize it. You relax in your mind. Aha, there it is. You release holding on and believing in it and bring it to something else. That's basically it. It's not pushing it away. It's withdrawing your attention and your energy from it, I guess. And then one can be surprised how quickly it can fade away again. How a thought, you know, when you think about it, what a thought actually is. We're talking here about a non-virtuous thought. I mean, it gives so many varieties and colors of what that means for you, right? But if you think about what a particular thought pattern actually is, it's virtually nothing. It's just like a hologram, like a pattern drawn on water that appears. And it itself cannot harm you. A thought itself does not have power over you. It's just that when we give it power, when we grant it a visa to enter into our mind and stay for 180 days, you know, with multiple entries, right? Then it's going to be there and it's going to be a resident, right? It's going to stay, you know. But if you say, sorry, visa not granted because you do not fulfill the requirements, say, why? Because you are a non-virtuous thought, and I have a virtuous garden in here, so it's not possible. You know, then it might be standing there, you know, at the border, kind of waiting. But you kind of you see it. You say, sorry, this is not where we. Then it doesn't have power over you. It's just when we give it power with either identifying with the thought, that's me, yes, I believe it, or suppressing it, which is also a form of identification. I am not that. You know what I mean? I mean, it sounds very, wow, how to actually do that is different. But I think that's a part of the practice.
Intention, pretending with this, like there was like a flow diagram with
Mm.
intention. So what is that? When intention is right before it, how do they relate to each other?
Well, I'm talking about thoughts here, right? But I mean, a thought, just as an intention, is a moment in the mind, right? Intention, the question is, how does intention relate to that? Tension and a thought comes and then an action. Well, intention is a factor in our mind, which we call actually an omnipresent mental factor. It is something which is omnipresent, which means it's always there. We always have intention or volition that moves our mind to something, right? There's always this thing of, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I want this, that. So basically, to take care of what are my intentions, so to say, is basically the same thing. It's like, where you put your thoughts, where do you, allow your thoughts to go or your intention to go? When we talk about, developing a correct motivation at the beginning of our practices, right? In these courses, for example, you take some time before you meditate or engage in classes to develop a right intention. Like, why am I doing this? That will become one of the main determining factors of what result you're going to get. So when a particular thought arises, then you can decide, I have the intention not to follow it because I know it's not going to be beneficial. So it's like, it seems to me, a thought arises or a particular state of mind arises. What is the intention that you bring to that, I guess, right? That will then determine what this thought is going to do or how it's going to evolve. I'm paraphrasing here a bit, I guess, but yeah, I like that, I guess. The point is, we have and we can learn how to get more control over this. That's a bit the point. What is going on in the mind and how do I react on what is going on in my mind? That's a little bit what even simply mindfulness, meditation, and concentration does, to be more mindful of what is arising in my mind. That's the first thing we need. We need the attention, that notices these are things that are arising in my mind. And based on that, we can then say, do I want to follow it or not? If we don't have that, things just happen and we have no idea. Only later we notice, my goodness, what did I do? What I was just thinking and doing. Only after it already happened. Then it's, of course, too late. So the main practice is, first of all, recognizing what's happening in the mind. And then being able to rearrange the garden situation, I guess. Yeah. Do we have something on Zoom also, or maybe not? No, nothing there. Okay, yes.
So we understand we are dependent arising.
Okay.
You said, is it independent of causes and conditions, or it's?
The question is with respect to dependent arising. Did I say independent of causes and conditions? I think I said in dependence upon causes and conditions, which is to say dependent on causes and conditions. Like a thought arising, you mean, or?
No, so it's interdependent or interconnected.
Well, when we talk about things happening in life, it happens due to, with respect to interdependence is happening all the time. Things arise in dependence upon other things. Whatever arises in our minds, whatever arises outside of ourselves, whatever arises in our bodies, arises in dependence upon or being dependent upon causes and conditions, right? So that points to what we call that all phenomena are dependent arisings. And the first level of something being arising dependently is that it arises dependent upon causes and conditions. That's one main, very profound already, and the topic of our talk today a bit, level of how things arise dependently, which is accepted in all schools of Buddhist thought, this way of dependence, causes and conditions. When we understand that there's nothing, the body, the mind, your thoughts, how you experience others, how all of that is dependently arisen, then that's what it's about, dependent on causes and conditions. And then in turn, how we experience these things, how we react to them, creates further causes, which then arise, give further results, and depends on other conditions and so forth. Okay. Maybe that's it. It's already 20 to 6. Raisaji, what do you think? Yeah? I think maybe that's it. I think that's all I wanted to say here a little bit. And I hope it at least sparks some thought and something that we can think about, and at least inspires us to see, that's maybe my closing words, we are not something fixed. And what our mind is at the moment and what happens in our minds is not set in stone, but it can be influenced by way of how we work with it. And this is really to really inhale that and digest that and see, I am an interdependent scenario here that happens. And how I'm going to work with the material that is there will determine what I'm going to be next. And there is a lot of leeway and space to do that. So to not get stuck in thinking I am a fixed thing here that is often colored by thinking there's a lot of negativity there or identification with harmful aspects of the mind. And this is totally me and I'm always going to be stuck with that. No, we can change by way of working with causes and conditions, being the gardener of the mind. Da-da-da-da. Finished. Thank you. That's it. Happy Losa. Happy New Year. See you next year.